If you are telling me to offer the single sentence, I would like to say or send message to younger members of the Myanmar Diaspora. So my message to younger members of the Myanmar Diaspora is that there is no single way to contribute, and your role matters, even if it looks different from others. My name is Ame Khin, and I am a graduate research associate at the York Center for Asian Research. So my interdisciplinary work brings together feminist, post-colonial, and forced migration studies to examine the gender and intergenerational dimensions of forced displacement among women from Myanmar resettled in Canada. So basically drawing on intersectionality theory and qualitative feminist methods, I explore how care work, cultural memory, and agency shape refugee women's integration, family dynamics, and sense of belonging. My broader scholarly interests include transnational resistance, feminist diaspora activism, and homeland-oriented political mobilization. Alongside my academic work, I'm also engaged in community-based advocacy. I work closely with Myanmar diaspora communities, supporting initiatives related to humanitarian aid, fundraising, and awareness raising, especially in response to the ongoing crisis in Myanmar following the 2021 military coup. I also promote public awareness by sharing my research on the agency of mothers and young refugee girls, gender diaspora politics, transnational resistance, and Myanmar women's activism in Canada through academic conferences across Canada and in the United States. Yeah, my interest in these topics is both academics and deeply personal. As someone connected to the Myanmar diaspora, I've long been aware of the complex challenges faced by refugee communities, especially women, not only current, but also other refugee communities who came from Myanmar. But I choose to focus on current refugee women because they are often treated as a homogeneous group with limited attention to the differences shaped by gender and generation, despite the growing body of refugee research. So, through my research, I aim to address key gaps in refugee integration studies, particularly the limitations of dominant integration frameworks, the lack of attention to gender and intersectional experiences, and the underestimate role of intergenerational and youth agency in shaping integration process. To do this, I conducted semi-structured interviews with two cohorts, refugee women who arrived in Canada as adult mothers and those who arrived as children or teenagers, some of whom were born and raised in refugee camps. This allows me to better understand how forced migration and settlement experiences differ across generations. They were oppressed by Myanmar military regime, and it was already more than 7 decades, and they were still fighting for their autonomy, independence. And so the interview participants they were in camps for more than 3 decades. And as I said before, some of them were born and raised in refugee camps, and they didn't get the formal educations. So this is their displacement histories. Yeah, that histories Conflict and displacement in Myanmar have had a deep and lasting impact on the communities I work with. So, in particular, just let me refer to my current research, although there are many diverse ethnic refugee communities in Canada. So, many current families experience long periods of instability, including time in refugee camps before arriving in Canada. So, these experiences continue to shape their lives even after resettlement. For example, many women take on major caregiving responsibilities while also navigating language barriers, employment challenges, and family institutions. Concurrently, these experiences build strong resilience, close communities, support networks, and a strong commitment to maintaining cultural identity. So one important insight from my research is that these impacts are experienced differently across generations. Women who arrive as adults often define settlement in relation to their children's success and family stability, while those who arrive younger tend to focus more on education, independence, and a sense of belonging. So overall, the effects of conflict are not just historical. They continue to shape how people adapt, rebuild, and define their lives in Canada today. My own experience within the Myanmar diaspora has strongly shaped both my research and my advocacy. So it offers me a deeper understanding of the emotional, cultural, and political connections that many diaspora members continue to have with Myanmar. So this positionality has influenced my research in very practical ways. As someone connected to the community, I have been able to build trust with participants more easily, which is especially important given the political sensitivities surrounding Myanmar. It has also helped me design my research in a way that is more attentive to people's life experiences, particularly around displacement, family responsibility, and ongoing concerns about the situation back home. At the same time, my role within the diaspora, especially my involvement in community-based fundraising and humanitarian initiative, has shaped my advocacy work and strengthened the connection between my research and real-world engagement. However, I am also very conscious that being part of the community comes with responsibilities. I approach my work with ongoing reflexivity, being mindful of how shared experiences and political commitments may influence both the research process and my interpretation. So I remain very attentive to issues of ethics, representation, and working responsibly with communities facing political risk. So I have to be very careful in every way. For example, when I interviewed from the diaspora in Ontario and British Columbia, I say that the names of the province rather than where my participants are located. For example, I'm interviewing people from Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, San Diego, etc. But I didn't identify their locations for their safety. So instead, I just referred to the name of the province. So this is just giving you an example. This is one of the challenges and the big concerns of my interview participants. So based on my research, sustaining transnational resistance from abroad comes with several interconnected challenges. So they are having ongoing security risk even outside Myanmar. So many activists are connected about concerned about surveillance, digital security, and especially the safety of their family members back home. They don't concern about themselves here. They are safe here. However, their family members are not safe. So therefore, they are very concerned about the ongoing security risks. For example, one of my research participants, her emails in risk, and she also have to change their username and the password very often because of the security concerns. Also, another participant, the parents back home, they were investigated by current military administration. So therefore, she trying to disconnect with her family members back home in possible ways. So this is some of the examples that how my interview participants concern. Did I answer your question? Since the 2021 military coup, the Myanmar diaspora in Canada has mobilized in very dynamic and multi-layer ways. One key finding from my research is that the coup acted as a catalyst. It transformed concern into active political engagement. While some people had long been involved in democracy movements, many others became politically active for the first time because of the urgency and violence of the situation. So in terms of how they mobilize, there are several key forms. First, fundraising and humanitarian support are central. Community members organize donation campaigns, food sales, and events to support people on the ground in Myanmar. Within this, women play a particularly important role. They are often at the center of organizing fundraising activities, online ground activities like picnics, fundraising, etc. Also, mobilizing community participation. In many cases, everyday practices like cooking and organizing food sales become key forms of political action. Secondly, there is strong advocacy and public engagement, including projects and awareness campaigns in Canada, as well as the submission of an open letter to the Prime Minister calling for stronger diplomatic engagement alongside ongoing advocacy efforts such as petitions and public campaigns. Women are also actively involved here, both in visible roles and behind the scenes, organizing and helping sustain these efforts over time. Third, the diaspora activism is highly transnational and network-based. People coordinate with actors inside Myanmar and across other countries using digital tools to share information and support resistance efforts. Women contribute significantly to maintaining these networks, often through communication, coordination, and community building across borders. Another important finding is that activism is not limited to formal roles. Much of it happens through everyday community-based practices. Women's contributions are especially visible here as they often balance activism with caregiving and family responsibilities. So their work, whether organizing, coordinating, or providing emotional and community support, form a critical but often overlooked foundation of diaspora activism. At the same time, this mobilization comes with challenges. Many women, in particular, balancing work, family responsibilities, and emotional stress, while also dealing with concerns about security and risk to family members back home. So overall, my research shows that the Myanmar diaspora in Canada has become an active transnational political actor. And importantly, women are not just participants, They are central to sustaining these movements through both visible leadership and everyday forms of care, coordination, and community-based engagement. So personally, I am academics advocates as well as community advocates, strongly supporting 2021 Myanmar Spring Revolution, and we are fighting against to military regime, and we are expecting kind of federal democracy. So personally, I shouldn't go back home for now. Otherwise, I'm going to be in problem even at the airport. So I'm just giving you the practical example that how the academic scholars and community advocates face in. Based on my research, sustaining transnational resistance from abroad comes with several interconnected challenges. So there are ongoing security risks even outside Myanmar. So as I said before, many advocates are concerned about civilians, digital security, and especially the safety of their family members back home. So even from Canada, participation often requires caution. People have to think carefully about how visible they can be and how they communicate. Second point is there is a significant emotional and psychological burden. So I thought that also one of the challenges that activists faces, particularly women. So many participants describe feeling constant stress, anxiety, and grief, especially as they continue to follow violence in Myanmar while being physically distant and able to intervene directly. The third point is there are practical constraints related to everyday life. Activists are balancing work, education, and family responsibility. So for many women in particular, activism is closely tied to caregiving roles, which limit time and energy. So participation is often something people have to continuously negotiate within their daily lives. Another challenge is sustaining engagement over time. At the beginning of the coup, there was a strong sense of urgency and collective mobilization, but over time, fatigue sets in. People face financial pressure, burnout, and competing priorities, which make it harder to maintain the same level of involvement. So there are also challenges within diaspora communities themselves, including differences across generations and even participation, and sometimes a lack of coordination or unity. So these internal dynamics can affect how effectively networks operate. Finally, I would say for both academics and scholars, there are important ethical and methodological challenges. So working with politically sensitive topics requires careful attention to confidentiality, representation, and the potential risk participants face. So for example, sometimes you know what the research project looks great, but it is not easy to implement and to be doable projects when we recruit the participants. So I am in the insider position, and I'm also one of the women advocates and one of the people who or who wanted to try as much as possible for the Myanmar to be on the right democratic success and success. So, however, when I approach the participants, they do trust me, of course. However, they concern and I have to make sure with them for XML, I'm not going to identify your location. I'm not going to I report your identity. And you know what? Sometimes anonymizing not adequate enough to convince the participants. So my current research, when I anonymize, I even didn't give their names. I just give the code number for example, ON01, business02, etc. So by doing so, my participants feel more comfortable, and also I didn't report any associations or organizations that they do involve. So it is found both academic scholars and the research participants they have to collaborate together regarding the important ethical and methodological challenges. So working with political sensitive topics requires careful attention to confidentiality, representation, and the potential risk participants face. So overall, sustaining transnational resistance is not just about commitment. It involves continuously navigating risk, emotional strain, everyday constraints, and complex community dynamics across borders. If you are telling me to offer the single sentence, I would like to say send message to younger members of the Myanmar Diaspora. So my message to younger members of the Myanmar Diaspora is that there is no single way to contribute, and your role matters, even if it looks different from others. Second message is change doesn't come from one action. It comes from consistent collective effort across generations. So younger diaspora members are an essential part of that future.